In 2018, Dr. Lisa Littman, an academic from Brown University in the United States, had a paper published which described a new phenomenon. Parents have reported that their children seem to experience a sudden or rapid onset of gender dysphoria, appearing for the first time during puberty or even after its completion. Parents describe that the onset of gender dysphoria seemed to occur in the context of belonging to a peer group where one, multiple, or even all of the friends have become gender dysphoric and transgender identified during the same time frame. Parents also report that their children exhibited an increase in social media internet use prior to disclosure of a transgender identity. Dr. Littman named this new phenomenon rapid onset gender dysphoria, and suggested it was fueled by a social contagion. In a webinar, she compared two conceptual models for understanding gender dysphoria.
And so I'm going to talk right now about a developmental model for gender dysphoria and an innate gender identity model, which you might call gender theory, you might call a gender affirmative model. So from a developmental model, gender dysphoria is may develop in the context of different kinds of cognitive, psychological, social, relationship processes. And the context is important because what you would do to help that patient is different. So for example, someone may become gender dysphoric because they are a young boy who is being bullied for liking ballet dancing, or a teenager who is discovering that she is same-sex attracted and having difficulty accepting herself as lesbian. Gender dysphoria might emerge after the trauma of a rape. And gender dysphoria might emerge in the absence of all of those things. And so the context is important because you would not treat somebody who develops gender dysphoria right after being raped the same way as you would somebody who's had gender dysphoria without any issues. So this is really viewed, gender dysphoria, as something that can have multiple causes, multiple treatments. Now, we don't have clear-cut causes, but just, I'm speaking conceptually. So context is important. Psychological issues, if they coexist with gender dysphoria, could possibly be underlying conditions for gender dysphoria. And I'm talking about the developmental model of gender dysphoria. From the developmental perspective, the desistance research is acknowledged within the strengths and limitations of the research. And as you would imagine, approaches really employ a thorough evaluation. So approaches that are consistent with the developmental model are a developmentally informed biopsychosocial approach, a systems approach, an exploratory approach. And these employ thorough evaluation and a judicious use of medical and surgical transition. So in contrast, there is the innate gender identity model. And this is more of a one cause, one treatment belief. So in this model, it's believed that there is an entity called a gender identity that represents a person's true self. And this gender identity may either match or not match one's biological body. And this is the source of gender dysphoria. And the treatment for this is transition. And because this is more simplified, the context is really not important. Psychological issues are thought not to be underlying conditions. And I'm just going to point out that's really more in practice than what's written. So the way it's written is that psychological issues are unlikely to be underlying or so, if you're thinking about psychological issues, the direction of, you can think that gender dysphoria might cause psychological issues, such as from discrimination and poor treatment, or that psychological issues may be completely unrelated, or you can conceptualize psychological issues as underlying. And so in practice, the suggestion of underlying conditions is often met with hostility and calls that that's transphobic. So this is the more extreme version. The desistance research in the innate gender identity model is rejected. And these approaches are approaches that have minimal or even absent evaluation and liberal use of transition. So the informed consent model requires no mental health evaluation before accessing transition. And this is for individuals 18 and older. And it's popular in the United States right now.
This model is also popular in Wales.
So we've adopted some of the things that we think are done really well. So, for example, because we now have our own service, we don't require people to go through the mental health teams. If they're age 17 and a half and over, they can be referred directly now to the Welsh service by their GP. So that's a huge relief to have that put in place.
Sophie Quinney, lead clinician at Wales's Gender Service, dismisses Littman's observations and is highly supportive of Stonewall. Both the First Minister and the Education Minister support the ban on trans conversion therapy and are very critical of the UK government's more cautious approach.
There is a lot more to do, whether it's the evolution of the GRA, which we absolutely want to see and we will continue to campaign for, or whether it's banning those parts of conversion therapy which are within our competence as a Senedd and a government.
With so many children being referred to GIDs, being same-sex attracted or bisexual, being autistic or looked after, and with so many having comorbid health conditions, Littman's suggestion that this phenomenon is driven by social contagion appears incontrovertible. MP Neale Hanvey explains how we are all ignoring the real conversion therapy that is happening under our noses.
I'm focusing principally on the assertion that there is a need for a ban on conversion therapy, including conversion of trans people. And I want to look at this through a slightly different lens. I'll start off with a quote from Kierkegaard. There are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true. The other is to refuse to believe what is true. And I think that is, in essence, the point I want to make, which is that legislation is supposed to fix a problem, not create a new one. And where evidence of conversion practices exist, they may not be mitigated by elements of such proposals. They will be exacerbated by it, because the true scandal that needs to be addressed is the medical and surgical conversion of young lesbian and gay males by affirming and transing away the gay. And this proposal, or such a proposal, rests upon a bed of dangerous lies. And it's but one part of an assault on the sex-based rights of women, lesbians, gay men and bisexual people. And it's perpetrated and under the cover of once important LGBT organisations such as Stonewall, who are erasing gay identities. They are complicit in using the T to erase the LGB. Now, there are three legislative conceits that form part of this movement: gender self-ID, amendments to hate crime and public order legislation, and so-called conversion therapy bans. Each are the antithesis of what they purport to be. Self-ID is not about equality, it is about promoting supremacy. Hate crime legislation is about silencing the raising of valid safeguarding concerns, and preventing conversion therapy is promoting the very thing it aims to stop. This bill is today's modern conversion therapy scandal, and it's affecting vulnerable children and young people who may be gender non-conforming or are struggling with normal yet distressing pubertal body dysmorphia. This bill would embed the lie that these young people have been born in the wrong body, that the normal development of puberty should be arrested with chemicals, something that can never be restarted or repaired. That emotional distress can be fixed with hormones and irreversible radical surgical intervention. This is being facilitated in Scotland and elsewhere by government non-statutory guidance promoted by activist teachers and enabled by others, bamboozled, threatened and afraid to speak out because of the attacks carried out by radicalised gender activists. Social transitioning is being arranged and encouraged in schools, with parents and carers being completely excluded from their own child's care. The NSPCC recognised this as a form of grooming, stating, "Groomers may introduce secrets as a way to control or frighten the child. Teachers prepared to keep secrets with children to the exclusion of their parents or child protection teams is not only dangerous to the child, but legally precarious for that teacher, and they should be open to prosecution."
And I'm very proud of our record as a Welsh Labour government for the last 5 years, whether it's the LGBT inclusive relationship sexuality education in the new curriculum, which I think is genuinely groundbreaking in terms of LGBT equalities, whether it's the new Welsh Gender Identity Service. I think there's a very solid foundation of work that we've done to promote the inclusion of all parts of LGBT communities. But there is
the Welsh Gender Service opened in 2019. It caters for people of age 18 and over and uses a very affirmative approach. The clinical director of the Welsh Gender team is Sophie Quinney.
Hello, my name is Sophie Quinney and I'm one of the gender clinicians here at the Cardiff Clinic. My professional background is general practice and I joined the movement to improve healthcare for trans and non-binary people in 2018. I use a gender affirmative approach and see my role as giving you the knowledge and support you need to progress your transition in a way that is best for you. This could cover the social elements of transition or things like hormone therapies and gender affirming surgeries. I'll meet you where you're at and help you get to where you need to go in order to live happily and authentically. I look forward to meeting you, and in the meantime, take good care.
Quinney is something of a political activist and the author of 2 training modules for all healthcare professionals in Wales who may deal with patients who have transitioned or wish to transition. In the gender diversity module, it states, referrals to gender identity services in the UK are increasing, including on behalf of young people under the age of 18. While for the most part this is likely to reflect improved access to information and representation, what is guaranteed is that more GPs will have patients seeking support of various kinds. Quinney does not accept Lisa Littman's observations regarding rapid onset gender dysphoria. Under psychological health, it further states, being trans is not a mental illness. It is an integral part of being human. In the latest edition of the World Health Organization International Compendium of Diseases, ICD-11, the diagnostic term gender incongruence replaces transsexualism and has been moved out of the chapter on mental and behavioural disorders. This has been welcomed by those campaigning for destigmatization. The change to the International Compendium of Diseases was made after sustained lobbying by trans organisation GATE, Global Action for Trans Equality. In the About page of its 2011 website, transactivists.org, the organisation states its aims. Both the World Health Organization and the American Psychiatric Association are reviewing the International Code of Diseases, ICD, and the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM, which gives activists the unique opportunity to lobby for changes of the current mental health pathologization of trans identities. A report documenting the meeting in The Hague in 2011 between GATE representatives and WHO officials is on the GATE website. It is clear from the report that GATE are pushing for the requirement for a diagnosis of gender dysphoria to be removed as a barrier to legal recognition. They're pushing for self-ID. The website indicates that the organisation is funded by Arcus Foundation and Open Society Foundations. From 2009 to 2019, Arcus Foundation donated $1,280,000 to GATE. From 2016 to 2020, the Open Society Foundations has donated $945,000. Figures before 2016 are not available. Between 2011 and 2013, it was the best funded trans organisation in the world. In 2021, a document co-produced by GATE, Transgender Europe and ILGA Europe was published. All of these organisations are handsomely funded by Arcus Foundation. The document was titled Trans Rights are Human Rights, Dismantling Misconceptions about Gender, Gender Identity and the Human Rights of Trans People. The document stated, in the current circumstances of frequent hostile attacks on the human rights of trans people across Europe and globally, arguments are often being put forward that imply a fundamental opposition between the rights of trans people and the rights of women, or between the rights of trans people and the rights of children. These arguments are based on falsehoods and are misleading. As presented in the primer below, the rights of trans people fundamentally aim to protect trans persons themselves. Fulfillment of these rights does not harm other individuals nor infringe on their rights, as will be explained throughout the document. The following paper aims at helping dismantle these falsely constructed arguments and provide talking points and references to address these false claims. This resource is designed for policymakers seeking to improve their ability to argue in favour of the human rights of trans people, as well as activists who work with policymakers on the same. The information and speaking points included here are being used extensively by trans activists in Europe in their efforts to combat anti-trans narrative and actors. The paper has a section on ROGD. What you are hearing, ROGD, or rapid onset gender dysphoria. Social pressure leads to young people unexpectedly wanting to change their gender, and that this pressure is spreading amongst young people, rapidly increasing the number of people wanting to transition out of the blue. How to respond, facts and talking points. Social pressure can be harmful. No one should be pressured into anything. Social pressure pushes people towards gender conformity and punishes experiences that fall outside of the binary norm, and not the other way around. The discrimination and violence trans people face are a reality that is supported by multiple studies and extensive research. ROGD, or rapid onset gender dysphoria, is a theory that originated in 2016 that has been widely criticised and discredited due to the flagrant flaws in its research approach. The story of rapid onset gender dysphoria. In a paper published in 2018, Littman professed to have discovered a new type of gender dysphoria, one based on social pressures, generally affecting people assigned female at birth, and based on parents' perceptions, appearing without prior warning from their children. The study on which this idea is based is methodologically biased, so much so that the journal PLOS ONE printed a correction and apologised to the trans community for publishing the original article. The head of Arcus Foundation, John Stryker, is heir to a multi-billion-dollar medical corporation, and the Stryker Corporation profit from gender reassignment surgery. The Welsh Gender Service was established in 2019. Over 2 years, the number of referrals to it has increased by 90%. In response to a Freedom of Information request, the service confirmed that they do not collate information on the numbers of patients who have had experience of sexual trauma, or who are same-sex attracted, or who have a neurodiverse medical condition. Sophie Quinney has been tasked with investigating what a children's gender service for Wales would look like. In her annual report, the Children's Commissioner for Wales, Rocio Fuentes, fully supports this development. She writes, gender identities for services for children in Wales are commissioned from NHS England. The recently published interim service specification for the service is highly concerning and is contrary to children's human rights, including Article 24, the right to the highest standard of health care. The NHS England service specification states that children will only have access to puberty-suppressing treatment if they commit to clinical research participation. and restrictions should be in place on support for social transition unless approved clinically. This is highly concerning, and it is unclear whether such a requirement could be legal and constitute free and informed consent. The Welsh Government LGBTQ+ Action Plan for Wales sets out to make Wales the most LGBTQ-friendly nation in Europe. The current service provided in England, but for Welsh children too, appears to be at odds with the Welsh Government's LGBTQ+ Action Plan. The Commissioner recommends that the Welsh Government should expedite work committed to in the LGBTQ+ Action Plan on exploring a Welsh gender service for children and young people. Many people are concerned that the Welsh Government in general, and Jeremy Miles in particular, is allowing feelings to override facts.
I went through my entire school journey without having my identity or my feelings as a gay kid reflected. And that takes its toll, although it also takes a while to figure that out. And we all know from our history what happens when people are hidden. It leads to ignorance, to discrimination, and to pain. And we've come a long, long way. But now we have an opportunity to make sure that our future generations live in a Wales of compassion, of care, and of respect, where everybody can be themselves.